Hi, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has shown just a huge amount of love and support since my last video. I really appreciate it. I wasn't expecting quite the number of views or the comments. I have not replied to every comment. There's so many more than I've ever gotten in any video. So it's been a little overwhelming, but I love the support. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Really sad how many people can directly relate, like how many people the same kind of thing has happened to. That just seems so absurd to me that this is something that is so frequent. What an awful thing for all of us to have had to go through, you know? I'm really sorry to hear, I appreciate your stories so much, but I'm really sorry to hear how many people went through a similar situation. Like, it's comforting in a way, but it's also like, wow, how really sad is it? But I'm really glad to hear that most of you feel like you came out the other side a better person, a stronger. I'll get there. Like I said, I'm in therapy. It's really helping a lot. But I thought maybe I'll just have a little bit of a chatty video just so I have something to say thank you, basically. Pretty much all of you are new. Almost everyone who watched the last video is someone new to my channel. Almost all the comments I got were really wonderful and sweet and loving, and I really, really appreciate it. There were a few weird ones, which you won't find them anymore. I am a millennial. I know how to cultivate my online spaces. Like, I learned how to do that before, well, as the internet was becoming a thing, I learned how to do that. So like, I know about shadow blocking people. Like, I know how to deal with them. I'm an adult. For those of you who are like, oh, it's censorship. It's not. Like, you wouldn't have a book club and then somebody comes by and they're just like, let's go extreme. Like I want to kill all of you, that kind of thing. And you just keep letting them come to your book club, like you would get rid of them. So you won't find those kind of comments anymore, but I just thought it was interesting. I think because almost everyone who commented is new to my channel. Most of you, that's the first video you've ever seen. So I had some interesting ones that were just like, I felt like I got too political at the end and said things about that, or they were like, oh, clearly Trump isn't your president, which, like, if you've been on my channel for 5 extra minutes, I'm a well-educated, creative person. Obviously, I'm not a Trump supporter. There's the whole thing, like, no one is immune to propaganda, but I think in a day and age where we're so inundated with propaganda, like, everything is either an advertisement or propaganda. Everything online. If someone's not trying to sell you a product, they're trying to sell you an idea. Like, even right now, like, technically, doing a YouTube channel, I'm trying to sell you an idea. Like, that's just a thing. When I did my creative writing degree in college, I did a journalism minor. I almost did a double major. I almost did a journalism major, but I got senioritis my final year, so there were like 2 classes I needed to take to make it a major. So it ended up being a minor. We did a lot of discussions and workshops around advertisement and propaganda, yellow journalism, just like the way people sell you ideas. So I already know what things are true. Like, I know how to spot things that are true and false, what things are selling you a thing and what are not, because that's something that I learned. And there's 2 different ways to do it. There's the journalism way, where everything is, a disaster. Either you have to fix the disaster or the disaster is going to hurt you in some way. Like, that's a thing in journalism that sells a lot. That's why everything seems like it's the worst thing, and there's very little happy stories, and if they are happy, they're kind of puff piece sort of things. Like, that's what they feel like can sell really well. This cycles around in history. The yellow journalism is what it's called. That cycles around. It comes back around. So it's something that we discussed quite heavily. It's something that is easy to recognize when you see it. We also discussed things like the difference between journalism and a news story. There are networks such as Fox News, which were created as an entertainment network, which was not created as a news network. There are also things like The Daily Show, which were created as an entertainment network. And honestly, just through like the sheer intelligence of Jon Stewart, he's such a good interviewer. He's always makes sure that he knows more on the subject than the other person in the room. And it's a very good journalistic technique that is not really taught or used anymore in journalism, partly because it is so much cheaper to hire young, pretty people who don't know a lot about journalism who will read a script than it is to hire seasoned or trained journalists. One of the reasons that I lost interest in majoring in journalism was because we were discussing at that time, which would have been back in I graduated in 2012. Back at that time, we were discussing quite heavily the prevalence of no longer keeping journalists on for a long period of time. Like were not tenuring journalists the way that they used to. It used to be quite a career, and now they were hiring, and they continue. This has continued on. They were hiring at a much higher rate people who had not gotten journalism degrees, who had not been trained in journalism, but who looked really good on camera and who were good at following a script. So basically they were hiring actors rather than journalists at a much higher rate than they had seen before, because this was all moving online still at the time. It has since then become almost entirely like digital. And so having a really attractive journalist rather than a really intelligent journalist is kind of the thing. And but you always had news anchors who needed to look the part. They needed to look good on camera, but you're losing more and more of the investigative journalist side of things. That was just something that was already in discussion at the time when I was in journalism. And it was kind of like you could go and be an intern and work really, really hard, and they could use none of your material and then not ever hire you. And that was a reality that was really happening at the time, whereas it used to be the way you got your foot in the door. That was huge discussions that we were having at that time. So you kind of learn to spot what things are trying to sell you something, and what things are just like sensationalizing something, and which things are really heavily skewed one way or another. There's the entire idea of you have to show both sides of the story. However, you have to learn that both sides does not mean you're just showing sides. All sides of the story, not all opinions on the story. Like if there are two sides to this story, you would show both sides. But if this story is about a fact and someone has a bizarre ass opinion about it, you're not showing that opinion because it doesn't have to relate to what the story's about. If that makes sense to you, I think that has become something that people don't really know. Like if a scientist is like, here's a thing that we have studied for years and here's our results, and someone else is like, I don't believe that, you don't also publish that I don't believe that. Like that's not the other side of the story. That's just someone's weird opinion. Like the other side of the story might be this other person who's like, we have also studied this thing for years and years, and we're having a few contrasting results to what they're doing. That kind of thing. Or someone's like, I reran that study and it's not holding up anymore. Those would be like two sides of the story. Like here's the original and here's the new. But someone just being like, I don't believe in it, that's not the other side of the story. So things like that. The other side of like propaganda and advertising is in statistics. And I took statistics in high school, and we sort of heavily talked about that side of it, which I thought was fascinating. I found statistics way more interesting than most other math. Statistics is using numbers then to skew data, and you can use numbers to skew any data you want. You can absolutely make any numbers that you get, any factual data-driven numbers that you get, say anything you want. If you're good at statistics, you can make a graph that'll show anything. It doesn't matter. So learning how to read a graph, learning how to actually read statistics becomes really vital to understanding what things are factual and what aren't. Even just knowing that someone can give you factual real numbers and have them say anything, that's a thing that people can do with data. It's interesting, but it's also really dangerous. So you have to be really careful at what you're looking at. Someone can tell you that this graph says something like this growth is really, really good, and it turns out that what they have on the X and Y axis it's actually a completely opposite result to what they're saying, but because they're just saying it and flashing it up at you, they're just getting away with it. It's just so prominent online, and so I know that there's a lot of misinformation just everywhere, and I think the problem is people not really understanding how to look at that and recognize it. And because that's something that I have studied, I've learned how to recognize it. Those were things that I actually took classes on. I'm not prone to falling for it, and I think that's one of the major things that why there are so many people who do support a president who likes to say things that are easily checked to be inaccurate, just don't know how to look critically at things. There's also like critical reading skills. Critical reading comprehension is very important. It's something else that I've studied heavily, that I know about. I've taken a lot of English classes. I definitely know about critical reading comprehension, which a lot of people don't. A lot of people read for just enjoyment, which is fine, or read to kind of self-insert into to escape, and that's all really good, but there's different layers to reading. You have to also be able to extract meaning from a thing, not necessarily just kind of skate by on the surface of it. And that's more important to journalism, to news stories. So to anyone who's saying, oh, that the video ended too politically, like, that was pretty mild on the political end. I think I pretty much was just like, hey, this is happening. I'm posting this right after the election, which I ended up posting it kind of a ways after the election. In case you need any comfort, here's this. Like, if that's too political for you, you might want to stop and think about why it is that you're able to remove yourself that far from it, or that it bothers you that much, that something like that feels like it's an attack on you in some way. Maybe stop and think about why it is that you feel you need to distance yourself from politics in such a way. Like I said, I'm a creative person, I'm a writer, I'm a poet. These are things that are necessarily and integrally, oh my gosh, it's integral to writing in general that is political. You have to have a viewpoint. You have to have come from somewhere. You did come from somewhere. You come from some background. Everything anyone has ever written has in some way been influenced by the situation that they're in, that it's been influenced by the way they were raised. It's influenced by, what's going on in the world. Even someone who writes heavily about nature, they're writing from a perspective, they're writing from somewhere. It is all political. All writing is political. Of course my channel is political. Of course I have a stance, I have a viewpoint. Again, I'm well educated. If that's not what you're looking for, it's not a problem if you're not interested in staying on my channel. It doesn't bother me. Stay or don't. I'm really happy that you stopped by, and the outpouring of support on my one video, which it's kind of sad also that, I've been on this platform for years and years and years, and doing a ton of poetry videos, a ton of like really interesting videos. At least I think they're interesting, and not getting terribly many views. But the first time it's something like really devastating and sad, that's when all of the support comes through. That's when all the views come through. And I know that's just the way YouTube works. That's the way the internet works. People are looking for things like that. And also just more willing to share and to support people who are in a difficult situation, which I really, really appreciate. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just also, I have some really cool videos out there. But also, if you had seen my other videos, you'd know my stance on politics, my stance on the current politics going on in the world. So anyway, this has kind of been a long-winded way to say that if you're a Trump supporter, this probably isn't the place for you. And if you don't want to talk politics, this probably isn't the place for you. Like, it's not that I'm going to bring up politics at every turn, but writing is inherently political, and that's just the way it is. So anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you so much. Appreciate you. And that's just what I wanted to say, and happy holidays to everyone. Yep. Bye.